People always say the same thing. Save your money. Put it in the bank. Let it grow. And I believed that. For a long time, I believed that completely. But then I remembered my grandfather, a man who never once walked into a bank in his entire life, never had an account, never had a credit card, never had a loan, never signed a single financial document in his name. And yet, when he died, he left behind more real wealth than most people who spent their entire lives carefully managing bank accounts and financial portfolios ever will. No, he was not secretly rich. He did not win a lottery. He did not inherit land from a wealthy family. He was a poor man, born poor, raised poor, worked with his hands his entire life. But he understood something so simple, so obvious, that most educated, hard-working, financially responsible people completely miss. And when I finally understood what he knew, it changed the way I saw everything: money, work, security, legacy, all of it. This is his story, and I promise you, by the end of it, you will never think about wealth the same way again. His name was Samuel, born in 1921, in a small farming community in rural Georgia, the sixth child of a family that had very little, but somehow always had enough. His father farmed, his mother cooked, sewed, preserved food, and raised 8 children in a 4-room wooden house with a dirt floor in 2 of the rooms. Samuel grew up understanding one thing above everything else. The ground beneath your feet is the only thing that cannot be taken from you. He heard that from his own father, who heard it from his father before him. It was not a philosophy they read in a book. It was a truth they had learned the hard way, through drought, through debt, through watching neighbors lose everything they had when the economy collapsed and the banks called in their loans. Because that was the other thing Samuel watched as a young man. He watched people lose their bank savings. He watched families who had carefully deposited every spare dollar into local banks suddenly discover that those banks had closed, that their money was simply gone. This was the 1930s. The Great Depression had swallowed whole communities alive, and Samuel, just a teenager watching all of this unfold around him, made a quiet decision that would shape the rest of his life. I will never trust paper. I will only trust what I can touch, what I can stand on, what I can plant a seed into. Most people heard that and thought he was being foolish, uneducated, old-fashioned, stubborn. But Samuel was not being foolish. Samuel was paying attention. Her name was Ruth, a quiet, sharp-minded woman from the next county over who could stretch a dollar further than anyone he had ever met. They started with almost nothing: a small piece of rented land, a borrowed mule, seeds that Samuel had traded 2 days of labor to obtain. Their first harvest was modest, barely enough to eat and sell a small surplus. But Samuel did something that almost nobody around him was doing. He did not spend his surplus on comfort. He did not buy new clothes or better furniture or a celebration dinner. He bought a small piece of land. Not much, just a few acres at the edge of the county. Dry, difficult land that nobody else wanted. People laughed. "That land is no good," his neighbors said. "You wasted your money, Samuel." Samuel said nothing. He worked that land for 2 full seasons before it produced anything meaningful. He composted. He rotated crops. He learned from every failure with a patience that most people simply do not possess. And in the 3rd season, the land responded. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily, reliably, like a quiet promise being kept. The 2nd year he had a real surplus. And again, instead of spending it, he invested it. Not in a bank, in more land, in a cow, in fruit trees that would not produce for 3 years, but would then produce for 30. Ruth managed the household with extraordinary discipline. She preserved everything, wasted nothing, kept a small written record, not in a bank ledger, but in a simple notebook where she tracked every seed planted, every animal born, every jar of food preserved. Together, they built slowly, not quickly, not dramatically, but with a consistency that compounded over time in ways that no bank interest rate could ever match. The new generation was modern, progressive, financially sophisticated, or so they believed. They opened bank accounts, got mortgages, bought things on credit. New tractors, bigger houses, cars they could not quite afford but managed to make payments on. They looked at Samuel and Ruth, still living in their simple house, still wearing plain clothes, still driving an old truck, and shook their heads. They never moved forward, people said. Such a shame, all that work, and they still live like it's the 1930s. What those neighbors did not see, Samuel now owned 40 acres of productive land, paid for completely, with no debt attached to a single inch of it. He had a small orchard that produced fruit every season without him lifting a finger to plant it again. He had cattle that reproduced and provided both food and income. He had a root cellar stocked with enough preserved food to feed his family for an entire year without buying a single item from a store. And he had something else, something that cannot be measured in dollars. He had zero fear. When the economy shifted, and it always shifts, Samuel did not lie awake at night wondering if the bank would raise his rates or call in his loan. When crops failed one season, and they did, he had reserves. When a neighbor came to him in desperation, unable to make a mortgage payment, Samuel was the one who could help, not because he was rich in the traditional sense, but because he had built a life that did not depend on systems he could not control. He did not sit his children down and lecture them about financial philosophy. He did not explain compound interest or asset allocation or diversification. He simply lived in a way that demonstrated everything, and his children, and his grandchildren, watched. I watched. I remember summer mornings helping him walk the land. He would stop at various points and just stand there quietly. "This tree," he would say, pointing to an old pecan tree. "I planted that the year your father was born. It has given us food every single year since then. Every year, without fail, without asking for anything back except a little water and some patience." He would walk further and stop again. "This fence," he would say, running his hand along the wooden post. "I built this myself. No bank helped me build it. No loan, just my hands and the wood from those trees over there." He was not bragging. He was teaching. Every fence post, every fruit tree, every acre of unencumbered land. He was showing me what real wealth looks like. Not a number on a screen, not a balance in an account that could freeze, fail, or disappear, but something you could walk on, something you could eat from, something that would still be there tomorrow regardless of what the economy decided to do. If this story is resonating with you, if something about Samuel's way of thinking is making you see things differently, please subscribe to Ember and Echo. Every single week we share stories like this one. Real lives. Real lives. The kind of wisdom that takes a lifetime to earn, but only a few minutes to understand. If someone tells it to you the right way, hit subscribe. It is free, and it might be the most valuable thing you do today. Now, let's continue. It was not. There were years when the harvest was poor and money was desperately thin. There was a year when 2 of his cattle died from illness, and the loss hit the family hard. There was a drought that lasted 3 seasons and tested everything Samuel had built. And there was a period in the 1970s when the value of farmland in his county dropped significantly, and neighbors told him he had been foolish all along to put everything into land. Should have put it in the market, they said. Should have diversified. Samuel listened politely, and then he went back to his land. Because here was the thing Samuel understood that his neighbors did not. He was not investing in land as a financial instrument. He was not watching its market value or waiting to sell at the right moment. The land was not his investment portfolio. The land was his life support system. It fed his family every single day, regardless of what the market was doing. It produced value in ways that never appeared on any financial statement. The fruit trees did not stop producing because interest rates went up. The vegetable garden did not fail because a bank on the other side of the country made bad decisions. The land simply kept giving, season after season, as long as Samuel kept showing up. And Samuel always showed up. He was 73 years old. He had lived a full life, a hard life, a life without many of the conveniences that his neighbors considered basic necessities. No credit cards, no bank account, no mortgage, no car payments. But here is what he left behind. 62 acres of fully paid land, not a single dollar of debt attached to it. A functioning orchard with mature trees that would continue producing for decades. A small herd of cattle. A house, simple, modest, but owned completely and free of any obligation. A root cellar and a barn full of tools and equipment, all paid for, all maintained, all working. And perhaps most importantly, 4 children who had grown up watching their father build something real with his own hands, who had absorbed his philosophy without ever being explicitly taught it, who understood instinctively the difference between owning something and owing something. When the family gathered after Samuel's passing, there were no arguments about debt, no surprise mortgages to pay off, no financial chaos to untangle. There was simply land, and the question of what to do with it. His oldest son kept farming it. His daughter built a small house on her portion. His 2 younger sons sold their portions and used that money as the foundation to build their own lives debt-free. Samuel never had a bank account, but what he left behind was worth more, in real, practical, tangible terms, than most people who spent their entire lives carefully managing one. And I have come to understand that what made him different was not that he was against banks or against the financial system. He was not an extremist. He was not paranoid. He was simply a man who understood one fundamental truth that most of us are never taught. Wealth is not what you earn. Wealth is what you keep, and what you build that keeps giving. A bank account holds money, but money can lose value. Banks can fail, economies can collapse, numbers on a screen can disappear. What Samuel built, land, trees, animals, skills, a debt-free home, those things held value in a way that no account balance ever could. He understood the difference between an asset and a number. An asset feeds you, shelters you, sustains you, grows without you having to constantly tend to it. A number in a bank is only as valuable as the system that holds it. Now, I am not telling you to close your bank account. The world Samuel lived in and the world we live in today are different in important ways. But the principle, the core truth he lived by, that is eternal. Build things that last, own things that produce, own nothing if you can possibly avoid it, and measure your wealth not by what is in your account, but by how long you could survive and thrive if that account disappeared tomorrow. Samuel could have survived indefinitely. Could you? The last time I saw my grandfather alive, I was 12 years old. We were sitting under that old pecan tree, the one he had planted the year my father was born. I asked him something that had been bothering me for a while. "Grandpa, don't you wish you had more money? Don't you wish things had been easier?" He was quiet for a long moment. He looked up through the branches at the sky, and then he looked at me and said, "Boy, I have never gone to bed hungry. I have never begged anyone for anything. I have never owed a man $1 I couldn't pay. And everything you can see from where you're sitting, I built with my own hands." He paused. "What exactly is it that you think I'm missing?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. Samuel never owned a bank account, but he owned his land. He owned his time. He owned his peace of mind. He owned his life. And when he left this world, he left it better than he found it. If that is not rich, then I don't know what is. Subscribe to Ember and Echo for more stories like this one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, real wealth is not what you earn. It is what you build that outlasts you.